So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming for the presentation for the Colapso. So we are working on the Northern Italy scenario. I will make the presentation in English, but if someone really wants to have it in Italian, I can do it in Spanish, and someone who said, may translate it. I think it can go smoothly in English, but if someone really wants to do it in Italian, just let me know. And of course, okay, yeah, because I think it can go smoothly. And of course, during the presentation, if someone really has any questions, feel free to stop me anytime, either writing in the message or just in the live video. So just make your question, no problem, in Italian, Spanish, English, whatever you feel more comfortable. I will be as well the whole day. So if someone wants to have a look at the game, wants to test it on Basel, wants to have a chat, wants any question, just feel free to send me a message. So there's no problem. What you see now is the Basel module. So it's not a final art, but it's most likely getting close to, because we make some small changes. But the graphic artist, if you know Donald Hegarty, so who made Labyrinth, Fields of Fire, The Siege of Vienna, so he's really talented. It's not only that we made the art of the cities, it's that we focus also to show the type of cities. As in the game, you will see a different shape. So for instance, Novara, that has no fortification around, but Casale Monferrato, yes. Milano has as well one more. Let me move it around. But you see a different shape. This is to differentiate the type of city, but also for visual disability, for people who has any problem with the colors, so they can see the shape. At the same time, you see the shields. In dark shield, Milano represents a capital with a shape as well, but Casale Monferrato is a fortification. It's another type of city. So visually, you can differentiate by the color, by the shape, by the city, by the shield. So I tried to make the game as more inclusive as possible, so you will feel comfortable. This is the Northern Italy scenario. What we are almost calling it the Northern South, because what you see, and I will zoom out. So you see from here in Franche-Comté, in Savoie, Genoa, Lombardy, Cremona, Parma, Mantua, and Tyrol. These are the only regions that they are played in this scenario, which is 8. And I can tell you that there is 43 regions in the game. So I will zoom in so you will see. So you see like the whole picture of the game. There is no units because in this scenario it's only focused on the south. But while the game focuses in the whole Holy Roman Empire, the northern provinces, Flanders, northern Hungary, as well as northern Italy. Because showing northern Italy is something really important for the 30 Years' War. It's a strategic war game, so you have to take that scope and that focus on the game. And northern Italy was so important that some people even said that if Spain had not focused on Italy, had focused on Flanders and the United Provinces, or even in the Empire, they may have won the war. Could be. But there is a problem in all the wars. So if you retreat, that's a loss of prestige. And probably that's why how you won a game in the Collapse, by the prestige. So the higher it gets, the more likely you are to win. And you see that in all regions that there are 2 values. The second one is removed from the updated art. So it only focuses on the first one. What that means is the number of prestige points that you gain when you control the region, but as well the number of cities that you have control in a region if you don't control all of them to take this control. But that value should include all 45 cities. So for instance, in Lombardy, there is 2 fortified cities, Milan and Pavia. So yes or yes, you have to control it. And there is 1 non-fortified city, which is Novara, so you should take that control. But for instance, in Savoie, that's different, because there is Asti and there is Casale Monferrato, that has fortified cities, you have to control them. But then you have one option to choose between Alessandria and Torino. So that's a flexibility. But this scenario, it only turns for 2 turns, from turn 2 to turn 4. What in the historical years, it goes from 1622 to 1631. What coincides more or less with the war in Monferrato, the war of succession in Mantua, the conflicts in Valtellina, the struggle between Genoa, Savoy, Spain. So you see, like, these small conflicts that they are not, they could see that's not more important, but if you see the context together, they play a role. So with this scenario, you can focus on that small region. But that's a problem. So if you focus on the values, it's strange. So in this scenario, there is a small modification. When you play this scenario, you gain for control of the number of the regions. So you forget about the region's control value. You need to take that control of the cities, but instead of scoring, when you control Savoy 3 prestige points, you control one region. So at the end of the scenario, which it lasts for 3 turns, you sum up who controls more regions from 8. That's the winner of the scenario. If at any moment someone controls the 8, they win automatically. But in this way, we turn the focus on the whole map, which has the prestige points as a really relevant factor. In this scenario, you keep the track just for learning, but the focus is to control number of the regions. But this scenario, it may seem that it's a small one, so you have small regions, you have certain number of units, armies, leaders, so it's more limited, but you have enough, we can say, enough meat to be hungered to play it. So we show you the small things that are important in the whole map. So later you have to multiply for so many fronts, and you can choose from. In this scenario, when you finish, you have the option to work in the whole map. That includes the Swedish intervention. So in that setup, the only thing that is modified is how you finish this scenario. So it's ideal if you want to play a short focus with small regions, more intense, and then you understand it and move forward. But being small doesn't mean it's easy. So it's intense because you have to control regions to control the scenario, which it may differ in the complications. It's easier to set up the game, but of course, there are leaders. And there are just 2 small leaders that they were not able to include here, but it's Colapso, which is abstracted as a generic leader here. In Landeck in Tyrol, so I will zoom in, that there will be like a specific counter with Colapso. And here in Torino, with the Lesdiguier, which was a French leader who supported the war effort of France in that northern scenario. And you may think France didn't enter the war until 1635, and you are correct. But there was some proxy war, as we understand now, with Syria, with Iraq, and small conflicts. But at that time as well, there was an undeclared war ongoing. But the smaller scale was to precisely try to avoid that this could expand into a bigger war, because at that moment, France was important, but Spain was even more. So the challenge to confront the Spanish mighty force, especially in Italy with Cordoba, was the grandson of the great captain, as you know, from the previous century in Naples. But as well, there is a second army with the Duke of Feria at Franche-Comté, who may move forward. So there is kind of a trap between the Protestant alliance, which is a term that focuses not only on the Protestant units, but also in the anti-imperial units. That's why you see militia and troops from the Protestant alliance. So it's not only the Protestant alliance in the game, the term, but also with the local regional support or against the imperials. So the term could differ. But the tension is important. So you move forward, you stay holding your back, waiting for the Spanish to come, trying to conquer the cities because it's 3 turns. And each turn, it lasts for 6 rounds. Each round for 1 card. You have to think about it. There is a small modifications in this scenario. So the Spanish cannot move until these French get 1 city closer to Lombardy. Doesn't matter which one. But these are small mistakes to reflect the historical setting. But then you are free to move, as you want. There's no limit on if you want to follow a historical path or not. In the game, there is 2 factions, the Protestant and the Imperial. So you take the lead of those factions and decide where are your war efforts move forward. This is a game that it doesn't only focus on the military aspect, but also on the political control to control the regions and to control more prestige points. In this scenario, you control the number of regions because it's something specifically important, but also with the diplomacy. So there are 3 dimensions in the game: political, military, and diplomacy that you have to balance and try to maximize your efforts. It's easier to say than to do, and that reflects the historical importance but the strategic depth of the game. It's easier to understand the main operations that I'm going to explain now, but to master the strategies, that's the challenge, and that's probably the fun of the game. And do not worry, because these are the scenarios. You can play the whole campaign, which is 10 turns, but there will be 2 learning or training introductory scenarios, the way that you want to rephrase it. So they're going to teach you step by step, from less to more difficulty, how to play the game, and they're going to let you to understand it. But if we are working on the game, it's a card-driven game. So let's show one of the cards. That's for instance. So this is a card-driven game. It doesn't matter the scenario, so you will play with the same concept. Each scenario will tell you if you have to remove any card, but that's specifically explained in the scenario. So you have operations points, as most of the CDGs that you can understand. And you can play with operation points for operations. Just let me for a moment, and I'm going to explain you. So just presenting now how the card works. And there is an event, which has a cost. So if you play the event that you can only play once, it goes from the operations point of the card. And you can decide the order. So you are not forced to say, I'm doing the event first and then operations. You can decide, since you will always have 1 operation point if you do the event, except for campaigns, you can decide, I'm doing the operation, I see the result, and then I decide what I'm going to do with the other operation point. Or I can do the event if you want first, because probably the event is more powerful for you to perform the operation. So that's a strategic thinking that you may have a look about. You can save operation points to boost your card later on. For instance, if you have 1 reserve point, you can do it as a 3 card. That's a maximum. So as long as you have operation points, you decide how you want to use it. And I'm going to show you the operations. So it doesn't matter the type of scenario, even if this is a shorter scenario or the bigger campaign, you're going to do all the operations. And just basically the movement operations. So there are 6. The first one is the movement operation, which costs 1 operation point from the card. So if you decide to do 1 operation point, you will have 1 left in this card. And how you move. If you move a single unit, which has no leader, doesn't matter if it's generic or it's a named leader, it costs 1 operation point. So if you move a single unit, you activate and it costs 1 movement point. How much you move or how far you move with that unit, with the slowest movement point. So the first value is the combat, and the second is the movement. So if it has 3, it costs to move from cities that you control 1 movement point. So for instance, from Torino to Casale Monferrato, it's 1 movement point. If it's a non-fortified city, it always costs 1 movement point. But if, for instance, you were in Alessandria and you wanted to move to Pavia, which there was no connection, but just for the sake of the game, just think that there was a connection, it costs 2 movement points, because entering into a fortification, which is a red shield, it costs 2, and a capital 3. This reflects a small fortifications, some units that they block the movement towards the cities, so, and you can combine. So if you were in Alessandria, it's 3 movement points. Okay, so technically you could reach Milano because it costs 3 movement points. But the operation, it always costs 1 operation point. But what's the benefit of having a leader? Because you can have up to 7 units. That's the stacking limit. And you move the whole stack. So, and that's called an army. The operation cost is still 1 operation point. There's no difference if it's a formation, if it's an army, it costs 1. But how you move? So with the slowest unit. So if in this scenario you wanted to move with the whole unit, so with the 2 French troops and the 2 militias in front, you will have to move with the slowest one. And that's with the militia, so you can move up to 3 movement points. But you can leave the units and you can move only with the troops, and you will have up to 6 movement points. The only condition to move with an army is that the leader card should be at least or higher value. So the operation point will cost always 1 operation point, no difference, unless the event says something different, but I'm just talking as an operation. But since this generically it costs 3 to activate and the card is from 2, it cannot activate. But for instance, Cordoba, it will cost 1 operation point from the card to move, and since he has a leadership rating in the top as a 2, this will allow him to activate it. This reflects how good, how bad is the leadership. And that's the movement operation, as simple as that. What leads the movement is to have a minor battle, what it's entering to a city with an enemy. So if that army from Cordoba was in Casale Monferrato for X reasons or previous movement, and they wanted to move to Torino, first they have to spend 1 operation point from the car. They have it, no problem. The second condition, if they want to move with the army, is the leader with the activation rating at least that value or higher from the car? Yes, because it's 2 and the car is 2. So they could activate. They decide to move with the whole army. They could decide to move with less units. But if they move with everything, it's the militia the lowest. So it has up to 3 movement points. So they could reach easily Torino, so no problem. And a minor battle, it costs no extra operation points. But if they wanted to do a major battle, it costs 2 extra operation points, which means that the card should be at least 3 operation points, or the event that mentions. What's the difference between minor and major battle? Because in minor battle, you only gain 1 prestige point, and you lose 1 if you're the loser, and you contribute with up to 8 strength points. So the first value is the strength. And you can go with more, so that's no problem. But that reflects that only a certain number of troops or the military units contribute to the fight. And you decide which ones. If you go with more, when there will be some losses, you can decide with more options to choose from. In a minor battle, you have 1 loss for the winner and 2 losses for the loser. When you have a loss, which is in the attrition, you flip first full strength units. You have more than 1, you choose. For instance, the troop. And you see like they have all 2 sides, full strength and reduced strength. The major battle, you can go up to 14 strength points to the battle. You can go with more, but they will only contribute 14. But you can use capabilities, which is some bonus for the battle there is some modifications if you have controlled the fortification, etc., where there is the battle. So there are certain values. And just to show you some of the capabilities. At the start of the scenario, you get some as a basic, and at the next turn, or during the planning phase, you will be able to choose more depending on your prestige. And you can add it. So, for instance, cavalry, it can give you 1 movement point extra. So when I said the lowest unit is the movement that you can move, this you can use it as an extra point. You can use it in a siege as a modifier, or in a visual battle. The moment you use it, it's removed. No problem. That's the movement, but you have the reinforcement. So for each operation point from the card, so this card is 2. So if you say like I use 1 operation point for reinforcement, I gain 2 resources. Later on during the planning phase, you can use resources to restore units that were reduced, to enter new militias, to promote units, etc. And you can combine in different operations as long as you have operation points. So it's perfectly fine if you decide that to do this movement that we did from Casale Monferrato to Torino to do a minor battle, because it was only 1 operation point, and with the other operation point to do a reinforcement. That's it. There's another option that says deploy, that you can enter new militias. Where you can enter new militias? In your home regions. So for Spain, well, for the Imperials, it's in red. And more concretely, for Spain, is all these red ones. So it's the more intense. But for instance, for Bavaria, that is the other nation belonging to the Imperials, it's a bit more pale. And that's completely pale in Austria. You can perform a deploy operation. The color is to reflect both the faction that they belong. Red is the Imperial, and blue, as you see in the Palatinate, United Provinces, is for the Protestant. And the intensity is to help people with visual disabilities to easily recognize which are the regions that they can perform that operation. So for 1 operation point, you can do a deploy, which allows to enter new militia. And how many you can enter? So if it's a home region from Spain, which is this red intense, you can enter up to 2 militias in a capital, which is in the dark shield, or 1 in Pavia. As simple as that. You have 2 operation points. You can do in different operations. You can repeat the same in the same city. So you could perform twice in Milano a deploy operation if you want to. You are free to decide for good or for bad. You decide in the game. There's 1 more operation, the 4th one, which only can do the Protestants, is the naval blockade, which is this one. In this scenario, it's only active the Mediterranean Sea and the Adriatic, and you can only place 1 blockade in the northern sea, which is above. Let's say that it reach the Northern Sea, and in the Baltic you can place up to 2. But since this is the shorter scenario, that focuses only on Mediterranean and the Adriatic. This costs 2 operation points for the Protestant, and both at the end of the scenario they can gain extra resources, but also they can detract some from the Imperial depending on the die roll. That's it. The 5th operation is the siege. Presenting the 30 years without a siege option, for me, in a strategic game, it's a bit strange. There were sieges that lasted longer than others, they were more famous than the others, but to conquer some cities it's more challenging, especially in northern Italy, that it was heavily fortified, as well as Flanders and United Provinces, and of course northern France. So if you want to take a fortified city, which it has a shield, doesn't matter the type of shield, it's a fortified city, you need to lay a siege. First, you lay a siege. At the end of a movement operation, you lay a siege. And you just place it a marker. below. Second time, you do a siege operation, which costs 1 operation point. There is some modifiers that they are explaining in the game. That's easy. You add it. If the value is from 1 to 4, that's a failure. From 5 to 9, it increases 1 level. So you flip from 0 to 1. Or if you flip it from 1 to 2, it's considered that the siege is successful. And you have an option, if you take a natural 10 in a die roll, if it's not a capital, you can clear it automatically. And you have the diplomacy. And the diplomacy is very important because it allows you to enter new units, but also some resources at the end of the turn. So I wanted to be short on the presentation, so I'm not going to be giving more details. So if at the end you have any question, I can explain or during the day. But just to show you the diplomacy maths, which I think it is not seen, but let me upload it in one moment. So one moment. Okay. Okay, so you should be able to see. This is the diplomacy math. The diplomacy and administrative. So everything that you work on the turn, on the resources that you gain, that you lose, on the prestige that is on the right side. There is some modification on the art, but you will see that it's here. So, for example, if you want to move Brandenburg, that you see 3 colors. So blue is a Protestant ally, red is Imperial ally, and in gray it's neutral. So if you want to move it, it costs 2 operation points to move. You move closer, that's it. The second movement, it will cost 3 operation points to move back or forward because you can continue. This is a way to stop the flip. So if you cost 2, then the other ones cost 2. So we change that during the playtest. What's the benefit of having an alliance? You will get extra prestige points. And in some cases, as Brandenburg, Saxony, and Hungary, and they have, a couple of units as well, England, this scenario allows you to enter these units in your favor. So you can get not only your own units, but if you decide, you can get from the others. So it's extra benefit to focus on the diplomacy to get units that you were not expecting or were able to get by your own. But as well how Denmark, France, and Sweden can enter in the war. So it will be moving the track from the foreign intervention on this counter from the foreign intervention. When it reaches the space where it has the Danish intervention, in this case, it flips it towards activated. They enter the Danish units. There is explanation how they may enter. But when they reach Sweden and later France, it's not only that they enter because you reach that point. It's that you decide between 3 options how you want them to enter. Generally, if you are more aggressive, you will have more units, but more prestige points that you will lose to compensate that. Or if you want to enter but more diplomatic with less units and have less prestige points that you lose. So you have to think about it. And for the game, they have 4 phases. That's the planning phase, which is done at the start of the game, where depending on your prestige level, so here the prestige value is the one that you are going to accumulate, but depending on the color, so for instance, from 0 to 12 is called a low prestige, From 13 to 30, it's medium. From 31 to 38, it's high prestige. Depending on that tone of the color, it's also helpful for people with visual disabilities. You're going to be able to choose more capabilities in the game. You have some basic, but you can add some extra. And there is about 32 or 33. Now, I don't remember the exact number of capabilities, so you can plan your strategies. You have strategy capabilities from Spy that you can have a look at cards on the other. You have capabilities that counter a capability from the other. You have artillery, which it gives you 2 more modifiers in a siege. There is cavalry, which has different options. So there's a wide range of possibilities to choose from. But also in this phase, in the planning phase, you can select how many Leas they can enter in the game, depending on your prestige. With the resources accumulated, you can get more units. You can replace ones that they were reduced. You can promote them. And there is some certain aspects. So you are preparing for the next phase, which is the second one, the campaign. The turn phase, what we know. At certain times, they are added new cards. You add it, you shuffle. You deal 7 cards to each player, but you can only play 6. So you will have 1 to choose from that you can leave it and remove it at the end of the turn, and you can redraw your card up to 7 cards, or you can keep it, except it's a campaign card. Then you go to the end of turn phase, which is more administrative of things that they are gonna be prepared for the next turn. There's an option for a free siege attempt if there is someone ongoing and you didn't reach it. There is the polarization effect, which is the diplomacy. If someone, let's call it, if someone is your friend, it will be most likely your friend. It will move more closely. So the polarization, it means that some alliances, as soon as they get close to your side with your color, the red is the imperial, as for instance with Brandenburg, or blue for the Protestant, it will move towards that side. But the stability from Spain, which it will allow to have more tercio points to replace them, or resources, it will go degrading. It reflects the historical challenge that they face with Spain. Just think strategically, it's challenging, and I have to abstract so many things. But for the sake of the playability and the fun, that was the easiest way in that form, as well as the foreign intervention that we saw. But the important thing is to have a look, and when they cross the level from 4 to 5, or when they will cross from 11 to 12, they cannot go back. And that reflects that the situation has degraded so much that the challenge is so important that it stays there for the whole game. It can continue moving from 5 to 6 and so on, and they can move back from 6 to 5, etc., but not beyond. The different colors is for the people with visual disabilities, but just think about it. And each scenario, it tells you where to start each alliance. So it's unique in its sense. There's the logic in the alliance. So while Brandenburg could be on both sides, even if it was Protestant or Lutheran, and they have 2 options from being imperial, 1 and 2, and 6 and 7 for the Protestant, the papacy can never be Protestant ally. They could be most likely imperial ally or neutral. Just think that when Urban the Pope was elected, was not supporting really the Protestants, but against the imperial. So having a Pope in the alliance neutral, it reflects that thing. And you can change the story, so you can decide that whenever papacy was more imperial allied, it could move more forward to being neutral. But Hungary can never be imperial allied. Most likely will be Protestant. And the more the imperial can reach, it's the neutral state. Moving into the neutral state will say that these units will be moved from the game. While this is a shorter scenario in Northern Italy, and this is not a big impact as itself, it is something really important to think in the bigger picture in the whole game. So what's the goal, in this game is to gain the control of the regions? Yes, not on the exact prestige points that you gain. You record it for the sake of learning, but you have to think it. If you start at turn 2, when it starts this scenario, and it ends at turn 4, you have 3 turns to gain as more control of the 8 regions as possible. If at the end of the scenario, depending on who wins, and you want to continue, no problem. Then you have the option to move towards the whole scenario. And that scenario, it tells you how to adjust it. It's done. It lasts about 35 minutes, more or less, when you know the game. It moves faster than what you think. So if there is no lot of analysis paralysis, and there's no more discussion, so many, this scenario could be played in 1 hour and a half, more or less. That's an intense game, so there is some mechanics that you will not understand really, but they will move forward in the bigger picture. So most likely it's a scenario that you want to play once, and then the idea was that there will be enough interest for you to move forward. What we're working now with the game is in about 2 weeks, a bit less, to have all the files ready for the final publisher review, both the rulebook, the player aids, and the historical and scenarios book, which will include as well as some strategies if you want to have a look on what may I do the first time, which is the strategies. That's perfectly fine. So it's thinking about 2 weeks that we'll leave these files. That will come the review. That will come later on the layout, the translation from Spanish to English, then the layout to English. So I expect that before summer in June, we will be able to be clear how it's going to be published the game. In one way or another this year, we will explain it, but I guess that the game, and to be sure like everything is correct, let's say that 2026. That's realistic. Just to let you know, this northern scenario is so intense and so important that there is articles in the game that were written by Ricardo Massini and by Paolo Carraro. So if you know about the history in the conflict, you will know more in the game. If you want to know more about the conflict in the whole Holy Roman Empire, you will know. But also, if you want to know how the conflict was taking place in Brazil, not only in 1625, when there was the reconquest of Salvador de Bahia by the Spanish. So there's much more to know and to read about. And I'm going to show you now the game cards. So just one moment. Okay. So now what I'm showing you is the cards that they have a direct impact, that were explained or they were designed for the game, that they have a clear impact in the Northern Italy scenario. But the wording of the events, it's not only an option to choose from, so you can interpret in the way that what says that you may act or may activate, it frees you to decide. So you are not forced to follow the historical decision. That's up to you to decide it. If the event allows you, you are free to decide. So it's not a scripted game. It's not a game that it follows the rules. So you have to move that way. Is that you can move that way, fine, but you can shift it. So for instance, the Duke of Savoy. So there is a troop in the game, and you can remove it, or you gain 1 prestige point if you control Savoy. So it forces you one option to control it. You can block or move the Valtellina path, which it allows to move the units from Tyrol to the north. So if you saw the units from Colapso in Tyrol, they couldn't move to the Lombardy there is the impact on the fortified spaces. So there is an option to choose for the siege as an operation, but there are events that allows to boost the siege or to reduce it. So as a defender, you can help it. You have to think about that the amount of succession could come up, which it allows if the Imperial doesn't control it, it may revert it to the Protestant control. So it's just think that the Protestant faction is not only the Protestant, as I mentioned, it's the anti-imperials. So it's a term that is defined in the rulebook. But this way, and there is some more options for instance, for Genoa. So you may not leave the unintended in Northern Italy scenario, even if you play the bigger picture, because you will be in trouble if these cards come up in the wrong hand. So the hand of the game is a common deck. So there is no Protestant and there's no Imperial deck. This allows you to think more, but at the same time, it frees more strategic decisions. So you will not be sure what's happening every time, and you cannot plan everything. So you have to be ready for unexpected surprises or situations. So this is, I try to be as short as possible in about 45 minutes, more or less. I will be available the whole day if someone really wants to have a look at the game, wants to test it. Even now, when we finish the presentation, no problem. Any questions, any messages, just feel free to reach me. They will upload it a video later on, but I want to thank to Ricardo, to Sergio Fabra, and to Fabio for the recording. And of course to Marco Lefrigio, who has been playtesting the game with me. We speak in Spanish, English, Italian, so no problem. I don't think there will be any problem in the future to have the rulebook in Italian, but that's something that to discuss with the publisher later on, but I think that will be perfectly fine. But I would really encourage everyone to support the reserve of the game. That's on the P500 from Network Games, so there is the link in the chat, so I will post it later, because the more they get it, the more serious it gets to the publisher. And now I think it was 470 reserves, so it's very important. And for Ricardo, who is not here, so we talk about it, and there is something that we're working to include the, just correct me if I'm not spelling correctly, Fabio, Il Promessi Sposi, so the history from Renzo and Lucia. So close enough. So there was a challenge from Ricardo to design a war game about it, so it was too much, but that is something that will be included in the game. But since Ricardo is not here, I think that's not fair to mention it. But the story is so important. When you read on the historical aspects of the 30 Years' War, and even closer with the Northern Italy scenario, you have to sometimes to disregard some information because there was already too much. But this aspect is so important that we really want to include it. And I'm really thankful for everyone. If you are coming to Spain to a convention, let me know if you want to come. It will be really nice to show you the game. If not in Italy, so who knows? I really want to. So I'm going to be early June in Alcalá de Henares. So if someone wants to come, or to Cadiz at the first week of October. And I will continue posting updates of the game on Ludistoria group. So I'll leave it to everyone. If you have any questions, you want me to show you anything that you want to, so just feel free to ask anything. And I hope that it was interesting for you, the presentation. And just be sure that Northern Italy is really important. Thank you so much. Molto bene. Okay, so we finished the presentation. Thank you so much, Fabio, for the recording. And if someone I will be here for a while. If someone wants to have a talk or anything,